So I'm delighted to be the chair of this session. So we will have 9 presentations in total. Will be 50 minutes each, plus some questions. And the question will be after each presentation. Plus, if we have time at the end, we will have some discussion for each session related to the paper that has been presented. We will have 5 papers in the first session, which is from 9 until half 12. And then we will move to, after the coffee break, half an hour coffee break, from 11 until half 12, which should be the second session. We should have 4 presentations later on in the second part of the session. Another important thing, you that you are online, there is a Q&A session. We already there, which you can ask some question if you have any during all the lifespan of the session. So please, we can start. The first speaker is Philippe Hamman. So, which he will present socio-spatial dynamics and changes in urban mobility practice in a pandemic context.
Thanks a lot. So I will try to share my screen.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is it okay for you?
Yes, it's perfect. We can see everything. Also,
okay, thanks.
Our participant. Great. We will mute. Okay, so and you can start. Thank you so much. I will keep the time, and after, if we run out of time, I will let you know. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, as mentioned, I will speak this morning about socio-spatial dynamics and changes in urban mobility practices in a pandemic context, with a case study in Mulhouse in France, and as a part of a collective research conducted with colleagues, Sophie Henk, Andrea Grigorowski, and Marie Fruquier, as you can see on the slide. The presentation is organized in 5 parts: context of the research, the city of Mulhouse as fieldwork, sociological analysis dimension, spatial analysis dimension, and a brief conclusion. So first, regarding the context of the research project, Mobility and Tactical Urbanism in Action. The Mutation Project is one of the selected programs of the 2020 call for Project Résilience Grand Est in France around the territorial consequences of the COVID-19 crisis. It's a multidisciplinary project between geography, urbanism, sociology, and architecture, involving 3 main partners: the University of Reims Champagne Ardenne, and you will hear Laure after me, she will make a presentation after me, Strasbourg University, and Strasbourg National School of Architecture. So the objectives of the mutation program is a better understanding of the practices and spaces of tactical mobility and a decision-making aid in facing the health crisis and, broadly speaking, ecological transition. So our main research question deals with what are the in situ characteristics of the temporary urban planning practices observed. In other words, can tactical urbanism be seen as a transition tool towards sustainable urban mobility? With 3 sub-hypotheses regarding this tactical urbanism. Can we consider tactical urbanism as a strategy to develop a transition towards sustainable cities? Can renewing bottom-up governance help build territorial resilience, and may short-term actions initiated in response to the health crisis imply long-term changes in urban mobility? So our empirical research methodology is based on literature review, interviews and surveys, and in particular, user questionnaire in situ in Mulhouse, as well as fieldwork with observation and spatial surveys. So, as I mentioned, we have chosen the city of Mulhouse as our fieldwork. That's because Mulhouse was particularly affected by the pandemic in 2020 in France. You can see on the graph about 300 deaths in Mulhouse during the second half of March 2020. Besides, the repertoire of city cycling was at the heart of the municipal election campaign in 2020 in Mulhouse, and more than 50% of the agglomeration's inhabitants live in its suburbs, so that there are significant and growing commuting everyday movements. Concretely speaking, the pandemic project in Mulhouse represented 13.5 kilometers of deconfinement cycle routes. It's what you can see, the figure of the cross. But in fact, out of these announced routes, only 8.5 kilometers are implemented indeed in the context of the health crisis, what you can see on these maps. Moreover, there was a large diversity of juxtaposed typologies: bicycle path, bicycle lane, bicycle priority, shared lane with public transport, car speed limit, and so on. And it can be explained by a strict application in Mulhouse of the French national CEREMA guidelines from the government, if you want. The main principles deal with transitory and ephemeral installations, fast and low cost. So as you can see, for instance, yellow construction paint, removable beacons, or mobile road and information signs. So now, regarding our sociological analysis, can we consider the pandemic as a driver of changes in urban mobility behavior in Mulhouse? We used, in fact, short questionnaires, taking 10 minutes maximum to answer, in order to be able to interview people in the street. And two sites were selected, concretely speaking, for the interviews: Boulevard Roosevelt and Avenue de Colmar, what you can see on the slide. The questionnaire was administered so as to take into account different factors having an impact on active mobility practices, are, for instance, weather conditions. And it was conducted in two phases, regarding temperature even, in March and then in April-May 2021. And in the end, we collected on-site 385 usable questionnaires. Well, regarding the main results, only 28% of the respondents declared changes in travel mode used indeed since the 2020 lockdown. But for those people who declared that, the main motivation, as you can see below, the main motivations are COVID-related or health-related indeed. So more precisely, people mainly switch from car use to walking, then to public transport, and then to cycling, or from public transport to walking, car use, or then cycling. That's what you can see on the graph. And it's the same result if we focus more precisely on changes in travel modes regarding health and COVID-related motivations, as I mentioned before. So at this step, three conclusions can be drawn. First, only a minority of respondents declared changing their urban mobility behavior among the surveyed population, which qualifies the impact the period of lockdown has had in the middle term on people organization of their daily journeys. Second, when there have been changes, they have mostly resulted from the pandemic context. So they have been motivated by the desire to avoid physical proximity with others. And third, we should keep in mind that people can use several travel modes every day, you and me, so that the changes that occurred were mainly directed to walking and then only to cycling. So if we switch to the spatial analysis and the place of post-lockdown infrastructure in the subjective geography of Mulhouse as a cycling city, our aim was to describe the cyclability of Mulhouse as it is perceived by residents, and more particularly regarding post-lockdown bikeways. And in order to do so, we drew on three types of material: verbatim, outlines of the daily routes drawn by the respondents on a base map, and the respondents' region annotations. The maps are subjective in the sense that they show how the cycling city is experienced locally by indicating the cyclists' landmarks, their spontaneous feelings and opinions about the cycling locations and facilities available based on their experiences and frequency of use, so daily, occasional, or rare. So let's see the maps. This first map, bikeways translated into the words of cyclist perceptions. So you can see different sections, and for instance, a section, for instance, this one as considered as pleasant, this one as dangerous, this one as crowded, and so on. We do the same for non-cyclist people, and you can see the same results, section by section, with some remarks, as for instance, there considered there is a problem, and so on. And this map has a kind of synthesis regarding cyclist practices, landmarks, and perceptions of space. So, three main results as well. First, the cycling city of Mulhouse, shaped by the pandemic context, as it appears from cyclist and non-cyclist perceptions, is characterized by discontinuity and the juxtaposition of sections, what I mentioned before, of sections perceived as pleasant and others as dangerous. So there is no unique representation. Second, some parts of the city are also sites of conflicts between users of different travel modes, and particularly caused by the creation of temporary cycling infrastructure after the lockdown. And third, the minimally defined nature of the infrastructure contrasts with the impact it has had on the spatial distribution in the city streets. It is a kind of source of frustrations, even if the respondents' comments also suggest a desire to a wider ranging transition. For instance, I quote some comments: near the schools more are needed, the pavements need to be improved, and so on. So as a matter of conclusion now, first, the COVID urban cycling measures I mentioned, taken in Mulhouse in 2020, seem to belong rather to a temporary urbanism approach than to a tactical one, as I mentioned at the beginning. Because our surveys show that there have been few changes in urban mobility practices among the residents surveyed, and they were precisely surveyed on the sites where new post-long infrastructure was created. The everyday travel behavior has not been structurally transformed, and when their practices changed, the motivations they reported were mostly related to health reasons and the pandemic context. So, since this is a particular time-specific context as an explanation, it is also likely to be temporary. And besides, our spatial analysis shows that in order to be given legitimacy, the new policies for decision makers, indeed, the new policies must not reify the targeted residents, but recognize their diversity, the diversity of their social profiles and of daily travel practices, as well as of their conceptions of urban facilities. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Philippe. It was really nice, a great presentation. We can pass to the audience if they have some question, but I would like just to have one question because I'm a geographer. So I'm curious why this shift from let's say from a more cycling city, it could not. Which are the obstacles that they will go from to change the paradigm from a temporary, let's say, strategy to a permanent strategy toward a more sustainable urban management of the city. So this is a crucial part. So which are the main obstacles and potential and how can we tackle these obstacles?
Yes, I think really when we consider the motivations the people mentioned, the main motivation they mentioned are directly related to the lockdown. So, for instance, when you consider other possible motivation, as for instance, environmental one, because at the beginning, as I mentioned, we could imagine that there are a double agenda. A first agenda regarding to the COVID-19 pandemic, short term, if I should say so, and a long-term agenda regarding more ecological transition. But in fact, if we consider the motivation explained by the people, when they move to other considerations for their everyday travel modes, it's directly linked to COVID-related motives, not, for instance, to environmental motives or to considerations that walking or cycling correspond to freedom, or I don't know. They are really linked to health, so that as soon as the context of the lockdown was not such a direct pressure, they go back to a kind of normality. So there is no new normal, if I could say, because the main motives were short-term motives by the people. And on the other side, regarding more, how can I say, the decision makers, for instance, the mayor and so on in Mulhouse, it was, I would say, quite the same. So for them, these corona bikeways correspond really to a specific context they are managed with, as I mentioned in my slide, with in mind some principles that are national principles from the CEREMA, so from the French government. And after that, they come back to quite usual practices. So we cannot say that there is a kind of structural dimension in the interventions. And especially, that's another important point I mentioned in one slide, there is really a large diversity of typologies. So there is no a kind of unique project that could be structuring. We have on some points a bicycle path, on other points bicycle priority, and so on, or car speed limit. So there is no unique view or overview of a kind of structuring project for the whole agglomeration. And that's another important factor to understand that it is not structuring at the end.
Okay, thank you. Any of the audience have some questions? Even Tracy?
Hi.
Yes.
Really interesting presentation. I'm currently putting together a proposal about walkability, so this was really apt for me. But one of the things I'm interested in, did you ask the people that carried on using their bicycle or the more sustainable, if you like, walking and travel practices, why they carried on the practices, and those that didn't, why they didn't carry on the practices afterwards? Was there any interview element here?
Well, we try to, I would say what is important to understand is the fact that, concretely speaking, our field work was done in 2021, so 1 year after the lockdown, okay? And so far, what was interesting for us is to know if the public policy done during the lockdown have a kind of structuring importance for the people 1 year after. That's the first point.
Okay.
The second point is that we considered this in 2 times, as I mentioned briefly. So one, globally speaking, in winter, and one in spring, because of course walking and cycling is quite dependent on those concrete issues I made. And what I saw really interesting is the fact that we interviewed people really on sites, so really regarding the sites where this project has been done. So normally speaking, there is no problem of representation or knowledge on something like that, because it is on the sites where the people practice this new public policy installations. And nevertheless, even on site, as I mentioned, only 28% of the people told us they have changed their practices. So I think that's the main issue.
No, it's really interesting. Only 28% of people changed their practices. Then a lot of people seem to be reverting to their previous practices.
Yes.
Now COVID's finished. I just wondered, for the small percentage of people that didn't, I would just find it interesting to know why they didn't. I mean, we don't always ask all of the questions that we would like to. After we've analysed the data, we go, oh no, why didn't I ask that question too? But I just thought it would be interesting if you had. That's all. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Globally speaking, as you can see on the last map I mentioned, yes, we have done that because on the last map, there was one map with the word of cyclist perception and one map with the word of non-cyclist perception. Maybe it was not very clear in my presentation, but that was ID, in fact.
Yeah, yes, but it was very small. But maybe you publish something and I'll read it, okay?
Yes, but I think what is interesting, it is the fact that the representation, perceptions of both groups, so cyclists and non-cyclists, are not so different indeed. So when we consider the different section in a kind of micro level, we can see that, for instance, people who say this section is pleasant, that's true for people who are cyclists or non-cyclists. For instance, I took only the map under my ears. Yes, there is a section for non-cyclists. They said problem. For cyclists, they said too dangerous. That's quite the same impression indeed. So I think we cannot really explain the fact that people practice or not this new installation regarding their perception, because people who are cyclists or non-cyclists have quite the same perception regarding these public policies. So I think there is a kind of routine, in fact, regarding, for instance, the daily journeys and people who, as I mentioned, take care of what is the most convenient for them, or can have a different way of practicing the everyday movement, with for some travel a car, with for other other situation bikeways and so on. So I think really, I said there is no unique representation. I should add there is no unique practice in these two.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, it's really great interaction, but unfortunately we need to keep moving. I love this kind of interaction. If we have time after, we try to shorter the time of the presentation. We can have kind of interaction after the first and second session for all the papers that will be presented here. That will be great. Okay, so the next speaker.
Hello.
Okay.
Is everything okay?
Is Laure?
Yes.
Perfect. Pardon. Dove sta il... Ah, il suo. Ah, sta il suo. E dove sta il nostro? Ecco, perfetto. Okay, Laure. I will say that you can start. We will move to our microphone. You can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Okay. This presentation is about urban mobilities in French intermediary cities and more precisely on the impact of tactical urban installations in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you will find some common points with the previous presentation. With the COVID-19 crisis, new urban installations in favor of travel modes have been created in France since March 2020 and the first national period of lockdown. Researchers have mainly studied this type of emergency urban planning responses in metropolises, describing COVID-19 as an urban disease, especially linked with dense settlements and intensive traffic. Yet, the same type of issues have also emerged in intermediary cities, where specific territorial dynamics are at play, dealing with public spaces, transportation, and urban connectivities. This presentation examines the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on mobility practices. It relies on the research project Mutation, presented by Philippe Hamman, which studies Reims, Nancy, and Mulhouse. Our research project, our guiding thread has been to consider tactical urbanism in the specific context of intermediary cities. The study is based on the combination of urban planning, sociology, and geography approaches. And for this contribution, we focus more precisely on material collected from on-site questionnaires and verbatim responses. We ask the following question. Have the new tactical urban mobility measures designed from above, from a political perspective, been the object of particular resident interest and perception? Our aim is to better understand how changes in mobility practices related to the pandemic can be observed and accounted for, and to see how they can influence the making of a post-COVID city. To begin with, we see the impact of temporary installations on the residents' perception of mobility. Secondly, the influence of residents' modes of inhabiting on perceptions. And thirdly, the study of residents' mobility practices in terms of temporality. Our first hypothesis is that social perceptions of daily urban mobility do not seem to have been much impacted by the temporary post-lockdown installation. To understand whether the post-lockdown installations were adapted to resident needs, we focus on the social perceptions. First, on the residents' use or not of the installations, then on the kind of expectations they had. To begin, let's see the reasons given by the non-users of the new installations who are bike users. They did not feel concerned by the installations, which shows the strong influence of the past travel routines, and they found a lack of safety in the Corona bikeways. The verbatim on the top right is an example, I quote, "It's not on my personal route and above all, it's dangerous." We also asked the opinion of the residents about Corona bikeways on 4 impacts. Most respondents gave rather positive comments about safety, traffic fluidity, and the living environment, while cohabitation between users of different travel modes was mainly viewed in a negative way. And regular users of the installations expressed tempered views about the coexistence of different travel modes in the same space, whereas non-users were more negative about this cohesion. If we consider the motives given by the respondents on the match between the installations and the expectation, first, 2 categories had the most comments, whether positive, negative, or mixed. The material features of the installations and the concrete coexistence between users of different travel modes. Second, 3 categories were mainly mentioned in positive terms, but only from a limited number of respondents about practicality, environment, and well-being. When residents' expectations are cross-referenced with age group, 3 things can be observed. Temporary installations met the expectations of the respondents for the changes in their living environment. Practical convenience was more frequently mentioned by respondents under 25, and respondents aged over 56 appear to have felt that their expectation had been unfulfilled, whatever they were. So far, social perceptions do not seem to have significantly changed, whether in terms of content of or implementation process. Our second hypothesis is that mobility strategies of residents are dependent on their modes of inhabiting. To understand their influence on residents' perceptions, we'll first detail modes of inhabiting and then see their influence on residents' travel behavior. The place of residence has a significant impact on the way of life of residents who develop, given the spatial constraints, specific modes of inhabiting. In order to define the respondents in relation to their particular modes of inhabiting, we divided the urban space into distinct areas using the 2 concepts of neighborhood and centrality. The cities are all clearly organized around the central space, both for historical reasons, significant density, and functional and commercial diversity. Given their common urban configuration, the neighborhoods can be defined as either central, pericentral, or peripheral neighborhoods. Some results confirm the assumptions we had on practices. Walking was the most frequently mentioned travel mode used in central and pericentral neighborhoods, whereas it only ranked 3rd among the respondents living in the peripheral neighborhoods. When it comes to cycling, nearly 1/4 of the respondents declared they had regularly used this travel mode, regardless where they live. And public transport are more regularly used by respondents living in peripheral neighborhoods than by respondents living in central and pericentral neighborhoods. To remember, only 35% of the respondents used the Corona bikeways. The new installations were more particularly used by people living in the city center than in pericentral and peripheral neighborhoods. Among all the users, nearly 2/3 of those who indicated using them frequently are respondents living in central and pericentral areas. We might tend to believe that the new cycling installations encourage residents to change their mobility practices for cycling, but the results do not confirm this idea. Very few respondents had been traveling by bike for less than a year, whereas more than 1/4 of the respondents had started before the COVID-19 crisis. Our third hypothesis is that resident perception is connected to change in daily mobility practices and travel mode choices. In order to examine whether there were changes following the COVID-19 pandemic, we chose to conduct a dynamic study of the practices over time by looking at respondent behavior before and after the lockdown, and by asking them if they wanted to change practices in the future. 73% of the respondents declared they had not changed their travel behavior since the first lockdown, which is not as significant as expected. The idea that was spread at that time was that there had been a massive modal shift from public transport to other travel modes because of physical distancing. Corona bikeways therefore appeared as a possible solution for public authorities to avoid a massive modal shift to private car use. At the local scale, the reasons for developing temporary cycling installations were different. As the verbatim responses shows, the health crisis presented an opportunity for public decisions makers to develop temporary cycling installations and make up for lost time. Corona bikeways were conceived as tools to promote practices that had been emerging. If you look at the right, 61.4% of the users of the installations were regular users. Among them, 59.3% were back users before the COVID-19 crisis. The questionnaires yielded the same results as the interviews of elected officials and technical experts. The new back pass were created mainly to meet the needs of a growing number of bikers on routes that were already used before the lockdown. 26.6% of the respondents declared they had changed their travel behavior since the first lockdown. Even if limited, the changes were real and mainly benefited active travel modes. The respondents mostly switched from driving to walking or cycling, and from using public transport to walking or cycling. Multiple reasons were given for these changes, but mainly related to the health crisis. And in the next verbatims, respondents left public transport to maintain physical distancing. In addition to actual changes, the respondents were also asked about considering practices changes in the future. 29.7% did. Among them, more than the half considered to cycling more frequently. And for the motives given of a possible change, environmental motives were given mainly by those who declared they wanted more cycling, while practical convenience was a motivation of those who would probably move to more car use. To conclude, in the three intermediary cities studied, travel practices have evolved after the 2020 lockdown in favor of more active modes. The measures taken by public authorities during the pandemic reflect the important place given to the development of cycling. Most of the installations have become permanent or maintained at varying degrees. Moreover, after studying post-lockdown installation from the point of view of resident practices, expectations, and perceptions, it appears that the part played by environmental motives in daily urban mobility and in the use of alternative travel modes should not be overestimated. Even if the corona bikeways have been considered as a convenient response to both health and environmental issues, this leaves open the question of the short, long-term evolution of the installations created and of their place in urban planning. This also raises the issue of whether the changes in mobility practices observed will last in the long term, since the changes were related to a time-specific health crisis. The return to modes of inhabiting closer to those that existed before the lockdown might lead to practices similar to pre-COVID ones. Yet, final reading of the verbatim responses challenges this idea, as it points to changes that seem to have become deeply rooted in the respondents' daily lives. Even more, the arguments given by the respondent for future practices changes seems to reflect their desire for more far-reaching changes in their lifestyle, which might be maintained in the long term. Last but not least, it would be necessary to survey the sites over a longer period of time to support this conclusion.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Laure. And it was really interesting. Actually, maybe the conclusions are quite similar somehow with the previous presentation. And any questions so far from the audience? There is one question, one curiosity from
Yes, it's a question also for Philippe. Did you share the results of these of your studies with the public authorities of the three cities, and for Philippe, only one city? And I wonder what is their feedback on this result, and what are their intention in terms of choices of temporarity or permanent installation. Thanks.
Do you want to start now? Okay. some words for the Mulhouse case, only to say that in Mulhouse there is a particularity. Is the fact, as I mentioned, in 2020 there were local elections, and it's now not the same person responsible for cycling issues in Mulhouse. So regarding, that's an important point, because when we considered the result, and it was the case with the new responsible for cycling issue in Mulhouse, he was the first one to say that yes, sometimes everything was not right. Maybe it was really done with the idea to consider those issues really in a specific timeline, and really regarding the fact they had, according to the precedent municipality, they had to consider that very fast and low cost. So that's clear. And of course, now the new responsible considers that it's now time to try to get more structuring issues, but to get to more structuring issues, that's more or less come back to the pre-coronavirus practices. So I think for the municipality, we could say that they are transitory installations because they consider the corona period was a kind of parenthesis. And now it's time to come to more structuring and more classical way to proceed, in fact.
Laure, do you have anything to add if you shared the rest?
Yes, for the results of the project, we are still working on the project. So for Reims and Nancy, we do not have share the result with the public authorities for now. So we have met them and discussed of the installations, but not for really the results we had on this project.
Okay. Thank you. So I think that we can move on. If other questions will rise during the session, at the end, if we have time, we will leave a bit of space for additional questions. So the next speaker should be Hiba.
Hello.
Perfect. One second.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Just 1 second.
Yeah. Windows. No. So it's the PDF.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now you go in view.
Okay, one second. Devo mutare. Hiba? Yes. Could you see the presentation also in remote, in the full screen?
Full screen. I am on full screen.
1 second that I will. 1 second.
Yeah.
So now should be fine. You can see also the presentation in remote, okay? The participant in the remote, in full screen. Could you confirm, please?
What do I have to do? I don't.
What? Sorry?
It's not in full screen. No.
Is not in full screen?
No, not for me.
They have to click on the button full screen in their computer on the bottom right.
Okay, you have to click on the bottom right your computer, the modality of full screen, because here we have in full screen. So also each remote participant speakers should click in full screen in
But I didn't. It's,
computers, laptops.
it says you are on full screen, but I don't see it full screen. It's doesn't matter. It's okay for me. If you see it as a full screen, it's okay. I can present.
Only to say from my side is everything perfect.
Okay, perfect. So if you have, I don't know if you see here, there should be the full screen, okay, at the end of, on the right.
At the right, yeah. No.
Yeah.
That's this.
Can they see the camera?
Can they see the camera? You can see the camera? Oh, no.
Yes, yes.
So here,
Yeah.
here there is a full button. There is a speaker here, and down there is a button. Like when you scan the QR, then you click there, it should be the...
Yes, what I did. But when I click... Okay.
Perfect. So let's... I will mute myself. The floor is yours. Hiba. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So hi everyone. I think my presentation will be different from two previous presentations. So let me introduce myself. I am Hiba Zielinski. I am a PhD in marketing, and I am a fashion and luxury consultant. So I'm going to share with you my work with Ghalia Bustani on, she is a specialist in retail, and I'm going to share our work on other types of sustainable places. It's sustainable retail and sustainable luxury pop-up store, in order to know if the luxury pop-up stores may be a place to convert consumers to brand fans, but especially to sustainability fan. So just what we have some pictures here from some pop-up stores. Pop-up stores is a ephemeral store. So for example, you have a Dior in Dubai for the exhibition 2021 and other pictures. So we will see in details after some pop-up stores. Dior with another pop-up store flower. So let's go to the summary of the presentation. So we will begin by understanding what is sustainability, and especially sustainability and luxury, and what is the link between luxury and sustainability. What are the sustainable practices in luxury brands? The research of the context of our research, why we choose this case study. So it's not really a academic presentation. It's a case study in order to have some brand dimension. The methodology that we used and the brands that we analyzed, and the discussion about this, and finally the implication, managerial implication for this case. So understanding sustainability, there is many definitions of sustainability. Some of them talk about environmental sustainability and neglect the human side. People, here people, marketing and management, we talk about consumers. So we have a definition, a set of ideas, attitude, intention, and behaviors in order to maintain the success of current and future generation. And here in marketing, we talk about people component. Sustainability for business is often referred to the 3 Ps, which is profit, planet, and people. And we may add P for place. Donc, here place is the retail place, the pop-up store retail. So let's start with this statement about Arnaud Carré, which is a specialist in marketing. Brands can no longer be satisfied with sustainable promises. They must demonstrate actions and their value. Yes, because consumers are now demanding sustainability into products, into all the supply chains of the products. So let's go to the sustainability and the fashion industry. We know now that the fashion industry is the third most polluting industry, and the fashion industry is the second industry using of water. And in the last decades, climate change has become a threat to humankind, and the fashion industry became to put some sustainability in some of the supply chain. And over the last 2 decades, the global fashion shift towards a business model that offers, I insist on the term of perception of clothing at affordable prices, the perception, because as we say, there is always someone who pays the real price of our affordable prices, and this is the workers and with their condition of work. So what is the link between sustainability and retailing? Here is another statement by Susan Ackerman. She says, make retailing with a difference, retailing with a conscience. Retailing is not no more about maximizing profits, but this is not retailing. Retailing must be the place where the magic happens, and maybe where sustainability can happen, and maybe the place to awareness the clients. So luxury and sustainability, at the first glance, we can imagine that luxury and sustainability is an oxymoron, or fashion and sustainability is an oxymoron. However, when we look at the essence of luxury, which is craftsmanship, human well-being, we can say there is not really a conflictual relationship. So luxury brands are facing now tension driven by consumer activists. So they are changing their way to product due to this pressure of activists, which is not something new. It begins almost 10 years ago with the collapse of Rana Plaza and this scandal of Rana Plaza. So they are recognizing, the luxury sector is recognizing its responsibilities to encourage sustainability in sourcing, manufacturing, and marketing. We can move on, and let's talk about one of the most known of sustainable designer, Stella McCartney. She said the starting point for her is not design, is really the sustainability. Yes, we can see the Ibiza pop-up store of Stella McCartney. There is another famous name in sustainability, Vivienne Westwood. She says, buy less and make it last. So they are a pioneer in sustainability, and this subject today is about this retailing and the pop-up store sustainable. So let's move on, okay? So sustainable luxury as mass, there is different sustainable practices. In luxury, we can see the sustainability and the process and the design and the sourcing and the product. Mass market like H&M, Zara, Primark, sometimes we will product some clothing sustainable. They will focus on the final product, for example, with 10% of bio cotton. In luxury, the retail is completely immersive into a sustainable place. However, in mass market, we can see it's just on-site information. It's here to push to sell something maybe not really sustainable, and especially for workers. For the communication, sustainable communication, luxury, it's about know-how, craftsmanship, slow movement. However, in mass market, it's a pushy. We can talk about pushy communication and forcing the message to push the client to buy something maybe not very sustainable. So, sustainable luxury, I will not give a definition about luxury. I think it's a high quality know-how, and I think everyone has his own definition of luxury, because it can be well-being, it can be a product, it can be a price. Eco-luxury is one of these new concepts in the sustainable fashion industry, and this means transition from mass manufactured aesthetics to single items, and the same time to diversity. Okay, so for the revolution, so we can move. What are the sustainable practices? Okay, Fabricio, you can go, because sustainable practices and luxury. We are changing, as I said, the mindset of luxury, and especially with the passion of Generation Z and maybe Alpha, are very sensitive and aware about sustainability. So the luxury is more and more going through this way of sustainability, and it becomes a vector of differentiation between different luxury fashion brands. For example, by the State Fashion Report has identified sustainability is more than evolving from a tick box exercise into a transformational figure that is into the business model of a luxury brand and their success story. So, what are the sustainable practices? Sustainable brand management is becoming, as I said, into the really business model of luxury brand, in order to respond to consumer expectations. Sorry. So the other sustainable practice is Fabricio. You can move, please. Yes, it's about, for example, we can talk about the Fashion Pact. The Fashion Pact is a coalition between different luxury brands in order to combat greenhouse gases and emphasize sustainability in the industry. So practices are on the really sector, all the sector and industry of luxury, not only at the brand. So Fashion Pact in 2019, it was entrusted by Emmanuel Macron and the group Kering, which is one of the biggest group fashion luxury in France and the world. First sustainable practice, it's I said third one, it's about all the supply chain, from zero waste, from sourcing, zero waste pattern design, using fabrics that could be easily recycled into new fibers, reduced stream construction, introducing closed loop production, and maybe now sustainable retail, which is something very new into the luxury sector. Okay. So here we can see a pop-up store, sustainable pop-up store about second-hand, from sustainable fashion to sustainable retail. So we are no more about just the products, it's also about the place we buy or we sell the product, the pop-up stores, especially pop-up stores or ephemeral retail. Okay. So, as I said, sustainability has turned into an opportunity to differentiation between different luxury brands, and store attributes are considered as an overall image for the store, which is driving the process of store selection. Okay, we can move quickly. It's okay. So the store an opportunity. It's okay because we have go directly. So the eco pop-up experience determined to make retail more sustainable. Okay. For example, we have the pop-up store of the Occitan, Coach, Balenciaga. Okay. Just as an example. So research context. So, okay, the aim of our work, it's especially to put forward different luxury brand pop-up stores, which created a sustainable pop-up store. So what is a sustainable pop-up store or retail? Comparing and contrasting them and highlighting some dimension related to the sustainable aspect. But also the objective is to propose some managerial implication and how a brand manager can invest into to enhance their sustainable pop-up store practices. So methodology, first of all, choice of our luxury brands. We analyze the 6 luxury brands, six luxury pop-up store. And there are luxury brands that have developed a sustainable pop-up store, which is not the case of all luxury brands. This is a new for luxury brands. So 6 luxury brands. We chose these 6 luxury brands, for example, into accessories, into bags, into beauty, and also French luxury brands, but international luxury brands, Italian or also Japanese. We studied each of these pop-up stores, and after we defined some concepts related to the sustainable luxury pop-up stores, and we highlight and analyze this finding that we will share with you. So total of 6 luxury brands between March and June. We collected the detail, all details are in annex. So we have Chloe, it's okay. We have, for example, we have Dior, we have Chloe, we have Jacquemus, we have Clarins, and a Japanese beauty SK2, which is a social engagement. Okay. So maybe if you have the time, we can after go to the details about choosing these luxury brands. Just to move. So what are the different brand dimensions we analyzed and highlighted? First of all, brands of objectives, why they choose to have a sustainable pop-up store. The aesthetics, the offering of the luxury brand into the space, the sustainable place, the connectivity, and the storytelling of the brand. And all of this is connected, we can change, connected to the customer. The customer is always centric, it is at the heart of the place, of the sustainable place. So we can move. First of all, brand objectives, it can be, for example, for introducing, presenting a new concept. It can be to demonstrate a socially engaged brand, sharing information, celebrating an event. We can go fast because of time. Materials, so aesthetics, we have the concept, we have materials that the luxury brand used to build the space, the atmosphere, so it can be a brand representative, pure, sober materials, recycled, recyclable, sustainable materials at cypress wood, as you can see for Dior, for example, with the sustainable pop-up store in Dubai, made by Sand, for example, the atmosphere, low consumption lamp, etc. Connectivity, the brand has to communicate, use gamification and applications. The message is always to be engaged, and okay, that's okay. And we can, something very important is to the storytelling. The brand is going to tell about itself, about brand heritage, and why not be the place to awareness the client about sustainability. Client or even prospects who enter this new pop-up store, it's maybe the place to talk about sustainability and to awareness the clients. The offering, it can be vintage, second-hand, eco-responsible products, capsule collection, but also always the brand with a message. Product comes second to communication on sustainability. Okay. So the customer, he is at the center of the place of the retail. We want to nudge the customer. We talk about trigger marketing to make the customer more be engaged and to participate, to create the communication and the product with the brand. So what to highlight? Sustainability applies at all level of pop-up stores. The brand can highlight one or several aspects of the pop-up stores. All can be sustainable, or maybe some aspects of the place may be sustainable. Why? Because the luxury brand's action has to be louder than words. It's time to action and not only to communication. How? By being centric consumer is the key to the brand luxury, and through sustainable pop-up stores, it wants to share a message about sustainability, message about the know-how, about engagement, about inclusivity. As this the case for example for the brand Jacques Mus. So managerial implication. Okay. We highlighted 4 implications. First of all, put sustainability at the heart of all brand touch points, from the process, product, and especially for the place. Because till date, sustainability applied only at product levels. In case of fashion, I'm talking about fashion and luxury. And this new type of sustainable retail is very, very how to say, new. Second implication, the pop-up store becomes a vessel of communication, brand value, and to sustainability. Even if the client is always aware of environmental impact or social impact or not, the brand is here to communicate about this. Third implication, is to immerse. The client is completely plunged into a sustainable universe, and retail becomes the doorway to letting the customer into the sustainable place. And just the final one, Fabrizio, final implication. The pop-up store is a real-time educational platform inviting clients and curious prospects, which I think this is the most important. We would say this place may be the place or a place to aware the client and to educate the client to sustainable practice and to sustainable fashion and luxury. Thank you from Ghalia Bustani and me. Thank you for all.
Thank you.
I hope it was clear, because it's completely different from other presentation. It's about marketing and luxury.
Yes, no, thank you so much. It was really interesting, at least for me. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we skipped the question. It was a bit too long, and we go to the next one. I don't know if Maria is available.
So you have to.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Maria, could you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Perfect. So now, yes, perfect. So we move to the presentation of Maria, because she asked to have a presentation now. So we will be glad to to have you. What? Yes, but she has some issue because she can't do it just now. Okay, so if it's okay for you, you will move after the break. Okay, sorry about that. Well, we didn't mention to you. So Maria, do you share your screen?
Sure, many
Oh,
thanks
you
for
are.
this.
Okay, perfect. So we will mute ourselves. We will see. So there is a video actually that you can you need to click there, and then you will share it and put in entire screen mode. At the moment, we are not seeing it. Are you able to share
Yeah, I'm setting it.
the presentation?
Yeah, I'm setting it.
No. Ah, okay. That's good. Oops.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
Full.
We'll mute ourselves. Thank you. So we are running out a bit of time. If you can do it to 50 minutes so that we can move to coffee break, okay?
Okay, sure. I'll try to fast forward and show the most important things. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Maria from Maxelligence, which leads work package related with the dissemination communication activities. So, Triads is the new name actually because we had some name change in the middle of the project, and it's a Horizon 2020 Green Deal project with a main objective to increase environmental sustainability and urban rural ecosystems safety. Actually, we aim to redefine and reinforcing forest protection and management, and we actually design a couple of technologies to be delivered into a platform. And in order to provide, let's say, an innovative and a holistic wildfire management approach. So our purpose of attending this event actually is to disseminate Triad's goals and methods to address a number of, let's say,
Excuse me. Sorry,
major
Maria.
challenges.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you are keep going with the slide because we just have
No,
seen.
no, no. I mean the first one. I mean
No.
the first one. Yeah,
Okay,
because
perfect.
yeah, yeah, it's fine. And I thought it would be better to make a summary
Yes. Thank
since
you so
we
much.
are running out of time. So yeah, okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Next one. Sorry, it's not changing. 1 second. All right, so I will walk you through actually the main points. I will go to the main goal, and then I will go to the intelligent crisis management technologies. Sorry, I have this issue now. Okay, let me restart the presentation because there is something stuck here. All right. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So in this project, we have 47 partners from 14 countries, coming from Europe and one from Asia, Taiwan. And this is also one big screenshot of our consortium. So I will go through the ecosystem. So all Triad's technologies will be tested and validated in real-life simulations. Actually, the Triad's ecosystem is supplemented by state-of-the-art technologies, around 26, and it will be optimized and developed and validated during the implementation of Triads, providing let's say advanced capabilities before, during, and after the extreme fire, let's say, events. So in the following slides, we provide some indicative technologies sorted by these three, let's say, categories. We sorted prevention and preparedness, and detection and response, and the restoration and adaptation in the after extreme fire event phase, let's say. So talking about the prevention and preparedness, the leader point clouds as well as the hyperspectral images will be used for accurate fast forest mapping, and there will be also a fire prevention system through the usage of decision-making supporting tools. And periodically, it will be also the estimation of the fire risk developed based on the vegetation, the terrain, and the weather conditions of the targeted territory that the let's say the administrator of the area could define. So also the estimation of the exposure of a certain village or assets to forest fire, passive fire protection products, and the development of wooden construction products that can withstand simulated and also the alkali activated construction materials with improved fire resistance performance. We also research regarding the insurance model and risk transfer solutions for the estimation of the physical damage and, of course, the economic losses arising from these wildfires. Next one. These are some tasks which have been assigned to partners of this consortium, and the fire prevention system, for instance, is being researched and developed by our partner USAL. And there is also the Earth observation-based toolkit for fire exposure and risk assessment. We investigate also the territorial assessment tool, and yeah, in order to evaluate climate-related risks and vulnerabilities. Last is the machine learning for fire risk analysis and fire spread by OVGU and BAM. So these are tasks that could be analyzed in any future discussion if you wish, and it's really important for us. So second phase is the detection and response. So here we address topics like the low altitude drones, which will monitor the area, and heavy payload UAVs will be used as fire redundant bombers, let's say. Also the Triad's computational system, which will be able to simulate fire and smoke propagation. Also the AR and VR virtual reality training system that is necessary for the training and development of the firefighters' skills. Also the social analysis tools. So we collect and analyze the crowdsourced information, such as the social media that are published by citizens, and they refer to the fire incidents, let's say. Tasks assigned to this category is the hotspot detection. So computer vision and artificial vision capabilities to the cameras located either in fixed or in mobile. There is also the visual object recognition on embedded systems. Within the, let's say, the scope of this task is all the required information that are being acquired from various visual sensors as images, in order to exploit the processing capabilities of these devices. And there is also this forest fire spread simulation. So near real-time simulation of wildfire with the physical wildfire spread model based on principles of energy and mass conservation. One of the really interesting fields is also the wind field model. So there are numerical simulation of the wind for the computational simulation of the spread of forest fires with the development of machine learning models. So another topic is the atmospheric pollutants dispersion model. It's a forecasting simulation of fire smoke cloud. Actually, we provide precise and computational cost, which actually provide data very important for the platform. And another one is the analysis of the fire behavior and spread of for the development, let's say, of the safety measures. So in this model or technology, the combination of the experimental and numerical investigation are being used to understand the fire behavior of vegetation, especially for fires moving in the ground. So actually the direction, let's say, of the fire.
Sorry, Maria, we will need to speed up a bit for time. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, so I will move to the last phase, which is the restoration and adaptation. In this phase, Triads will build a new land and field-based restoration initiative that is using techniques such as the agroforestry, the drones for seed spread, and IoT sensors. The advanced restoration decision support system is also very helpful for this direction. And the last one in this phase is the DSS restoration module. So the conceptual development of DSS for adaptive post-fire management. There are also horizontal tasks regarding the artificial intelligence and VR training, which is very important for all the users and decision makers of this platform. So these are I put also some something related with the big data technologies that are being used, but probably we don't have enough time. It's really interesting. If you want, you can visit anytime our website and have a look there. It's very unique and yeah. Okay, so just for you to understand, the triads aim is to increase environmental sustainability and urban rural ecosystem safety. The expected impact is visible in 8 pilot demonstrations. We already work in these 8 pilots, so there is so much interest and developing these locations, let's say, systems So this strong impact that Riyadh aims to have is in line with the European Green Deal objectives to boost the EU's ability and to predict and manage environmental disasters as the emerging need for humans' lives protection in an immediate priority, as they said. So the pilot sites is in Europe are these 7 plus Taiwan, eight locations, and Triads is developing and validating this innovative, sustainable, applied holistic wildfire management ecosystem in these 8 locations. And in this slide, we present the wildfire risk management projects that Triads is clustering with, and the key output of each one. That's all for me. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm available anytime if you need any other clarification.
Okay, we have just time for one short question. So I don't know if someone of the audience has something to ask, even remote. Non capire se
I have a question.
okay. Just
Yeah.
one.
Sure.
Maria, I wanted to ask if actually after the project, I didn't understand if it is finished or not. Do you have a joint result that will remain exploitable, or each individual pilots or technology provider will exploit their own technology developed during the project for their own purpose? Is there something jointly owned that can be exploited in other project or in other context?
So there is a exploitation plan for this project, which is agreed by all the partners of this project, 47 in number. So we have plans for this, and we're new in this section. So I mean, a couple of months. We started in late December. So we are building this plan. And apart from the dissemination and communication activities, the exploitation specifically is not, let's say, a commercial, let's say, tool at the moment. It's a research platform that many technologies will be, let's say, adapted and used in order to export really important data for all these prevention and detection system. So we are open in any let's say proposal for business exploitation in the future.
Okay, thank you. So now we will have a coffee break. Okay, so for 20 minutes coffee break, we go back here at 10:50. Then we start the presentation in person from Huda.
Hello, good morning. My name is Huda Dawood. I'm a senior lecturer at Teesside University, and I work and have worked on several European projects. This project, SMEmPower, is one of the projects that is different to the projects that we've done because it's purely educational basis. Part of Teesside, we have expertise in a lot of technical optimization, analysis, anything to do with overall evaluations. But this one in particular was all, it's about SME, which is developing a holistic framework for the empowerment of SME to increase their energy efficiency and their awareness. And it might be too early to say, but in a way, this works at two ways, because improving efficiency is also going towards zero carbon, which is the target for 2050. So eventually, I think this project will probably look at the decarbonization or net zero projects. So there were other objectives, but the two main objectives of this project was to empower SMEs to Europe to conduct or audit their own SME companies and implement their proposals, or encourage them to implement their proposals. And to do this, we delivered CPD courses, and the CPD course took about 8 weeks of, I think, sometimes on a half day or daily, every Thursday, I think we used to do that. And it was quite intensive, and they had to do a practical at the end, which was made into a report, and they were certified. It wasn't one of those standard certification, but I think eventually we were going to run that, so we will have a credit certification as well. So that's the main objective. So how did we go through? Why do we have to do this? SME, believe it or not, whether it's UK or Europe, form not just 99.9% of the business of UK. Just in case somebody doesn't understand what SME are, is small, medium, or enterprise, and it accounts. So the definition of that is people less than 250 people in the company, and a turnover of less than 50 million. So why are SMEs challenging to the legal, to the government or policymakers, is because of their diversity. There's a lot of different things, and legislation is difficult. Okay, so SME face similar barrier because they require different solutions, and it really comes down to lack of resources, whether knowledge, and it might be money, and it might be know-how. So it's a lot of that involved. So SME can make a small difference. I should be actually pressing these as I go along. So it might be, they are small, but collectively they make a big difference to the whole. As I said, it's not just efficiency. We're looking eventually at net zero. So potential solutions for this project was to enhance the skill of 720 energy experts in SMEs across Europe. Just to make you aware, this project involved 10 partners across 6 countries, including Greece, Cyprus, Slovenia, Italy, I'm trying to think, UK, as well as, I do apologize if I can't remember somebody, I think it was, hold on, I think I've gone through all of them, but just in case, I do apologize if I've missed the country. I think I did say Cyprus. Anyway, so what we had to do is enhance the skill of 720 experts, implement education CPD courses. Now the CPD courses, we had to implement in 3 times. Each time at least 30 individuals joined. The only problem, this project started in September 2019. Roll on to the next year, March 2020, that's when COVID occurs, and that's when things sort of became a lull. Having said that, we ended up enlisting not only company personnel, but enlisting in future company personnel, basically people who are doing, who are going to be energy professionals. So undergraduate MSc students, we enlisted in there as well. So what we did, we developed an online energy management platform for the SMEs. We developed tools. Generic tools were made by the project. When we did the CPD course, we showed them how to create so we showed them how to do this. And at the end of that, we had to at least look at 160 use cases. So basically companies where they get to look at their own company, create an audit, look at the maturity level of their energy efficiency, and then try and find solutions for that and create a report at the end. So although it was, but it was quite intensive. As I said, one of the biggest problems we had is COVID, and we couldn't do the face-to-face meetings, so things were done online, which wasn't very good. But eventually we achieved our targets. So looking at how we did this, obviously we started looking at literature review. So we looked at everything. So what are the barriers, the funding schemes? We looked at everything, the maturity levels of across Europe. And then we created a survey questionnaire to understand the energy profile of the companies and their energy efficiency measures. Then we developed SME maturity models. You'll find in a minute that maturity levels, we had 4 levels, basically were for people who are aware of climate change but don't know anything to do, with that. And then I'll explain that later in a short while. Then we did short training courses. Short training courses said they involved, it came across 8 weeks. And they ended up with sort of like intensive. So every Thursday we had a 1 day where they did the course. And we had 6 units to deliver, which included a practical and included a report. Eventually we looked at the data analysis that we collected from SMEs, and then we developed energy efficiency report for the SMEs. So this is what I was talking about, maturity level to support pre-feasibility energy audits. So we looked at 4 levels, start with the lowest level with people who've got the awareness of climate change, but don't have the knowledge about the efficiency measures. And it goes all the way to the optimized, where people are not just aware, they are actually implementing, they integrated with the energy efficiency assessment within their existing system. So they go all the way. And of course, you will have in between. You will be surprised that some of the, I wouldn't want to put a number on it, but there's quite a few companies that are at level 1. They've been doing things for years. Nothing changed to them because if it works, why fix it? Until we made them aware of what was happening. So here's obviously we can't name names, but one of the 2 companies, so I'm just going to show you an example. So this SME basically involved electric wire recycling. They were using diesel generators to create their energy, and they were using something like 500 megawatt per year. And of course, once you do the analysis, you implement new things like PV. They've looked at it, and then it's creating 30% saving. One of the things that we did in the course, of course, is what, and I actually delivered this, was the cost benefits. So if you were to implement the renewables into your companies, how much it's going to cost? When are you going to break even? When are you going to get the return of investment? Which is a very valuable thing. Not only we did that, but we showed them on how to create it. So individual companies ended up doing individual things, and it made them aware that it might be possible to do this. And part of that as well, we made them aware of funding. Now, you will find later on that most of the funding is not widely advertised, and it can be competitive, and that's one of the problems and the barriers that we will see. Company B, which was a very successful company, it's an SME in Scotland, and it's basically manufacturing house framework. Basically, they use UVC and timber frames. And they were using something like 380 megawatt per year, and they use that straight from the grid. Again, we looked at replacing the energy, implementing by using PVs, air source heat pumps. Even, you'll be surprised, even the lighting, when you change lighting, it can make a significant difference. And it says something like they would save over 10%. I think it would be even more. I think if they get to implement all of that. So results of the analysis. So as I said, what the barriers that, you know, it can go from legislation, institutional, technical, financial, and communication. In my opinion, the most important ones we came across is legislation. As I said, SME companies are not required to do energy audits, whereas if you're not an SME, you have to do an audit every 4 years and you have to implement things. And I think unless policies are put into place, then things are not going to happen. Not going to happen for the reason because most of the SMEs either are not aware of what's going on or don't have the finance to you know. And then if you're trying to replace things, then that's interruption to their production. So they are not willing to do that as well. So it can go all the way. So unless something comes, and as I said, I'll connect this. I think eventually the government will have to do something about this, because in the UK, we are heading for zero carbon by 2050, and then we have to implement something like that, all the efficiency renewables. And looking at what's happening nowadays, I think with the Ukraine and the Russian war, I think that things like that is going to be speeded up in a way, because there's a need for renewables and more efficiency across industry. So these are the survey results. So we questioned SMEs. So so has your company carried out energy audit? And you'll find, more than half said yes, they have. Is there energy efficiency strategy? And people weren't aware if there is one, and the majority said no, there isn't. Is there a budget approved for investment? No. So you can see the majority said no. And are there any funding? Not a lot of people are aware of funding sources, so they end up using their own resources. If you're a well-off company, then you'll probably end up implementing that, being aware of the energy efficiency. But if you're, even if you're aware and you can't afford it, then you can't do anything about it. You just have to go along with it, unless they get the help from the government. And I think something has got to happen soon. So, in conclusion, SMEs don't realize the potential for reducing, the majority that we were, and then we looked at short training to promote and enhance SME capabilities. Most SMEs don't understand their current energy efficiency and maturity level. As I said, they, some of them are aware of it, but don't do anything about it. Some of it, even if they know how to do things, then they can't implement it. So I think once they understand the maturity level, then they can go and try and improve to the next level until they reach level 4. So SMEs need education on the benefit of employing energy managers. As I said, if you're a company that is in SMEs, they have in place an energy auditor, and they go all year round, going around, on how to improve things. In a way, you are doing things to save money for the company. And as I said, as a requirement with a net zero carbon emission. And then we found that a lot of the people are not aware of the grants and the funding that is out there, and it's purely, and I think I've been speaking to several European countries, they, even if there is an incentive, is not well advertised. No one knows about it. And when they do realize it is, the deadline for helping out, so for instance, the Green Deal, it's finished by the time people realize there's there. So that's what we're looking at. And that's it. So in conclusion, overall, after doing this project, we are going to conduct probably a CPD course for all SMEs, and I think it's going to be continuing. We'll probably charge for it because when they did it during the project, it was free. This time we'll charge for it because it's effective, and I think we might even go for the accreditation, given the fact if there's more people interested, you know, then we'll go for that. Thank you very much. That's my name. These are the consulting partners. Thank you.
So we have time for one question. I don't know if from the audience, in present or remote, they have some question for Huda.
How did you reach the SME?
Well, as I said, because it was COVID period, we deal with a lot of energy companies anyway. So we have, you know, so we ended up having, you know, the contact. Sorry. So we did have contact. So we did get in touch. The problem we had is, in order to do the auditing, most of the companies were at home. That's a bit. So we had to wait until they went back to work and then do the audit. That's one of the major. But having said that, it's one of the projects that didn't ask for the extension. We ended up doing things on time. Yeah.
Thank you for the fantastic presentation. I was just wondering whether are you still in touch with these companies, because now obviously the cost of electricity has gone up massively in the UK.
Yeah.
And whether you have been hearing noises from them about you know, doing more or.
I think the problem is, Dana, as you know, because you know, it's lack of resources in terms of money, it's investment. So if you're a well-off company, you'll probably be looking for something like that, and they'll probably come back to us for help, because we did some auditing and we told them how to do it. If you are a small company, what can you do if you can't afford the, you know, because all the renewables cost money, and this is one of the reasons why we did the cost benefit, because we wanted to tell them when they're gonna get the, you know, in terms of funding, as I said, it's mostly competitive now. It's not like you just go for a grant. You have to go through funding mechanism and things like that. And we can certainly help them. We've gone through Innovate UK with some of the company to look for innovative solutions and things like that. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we can move to the next presentation from Luca Morganti. I don't know if you...
Hi, everyone. Yes, good morning.
So I will stop sharing. Okay, stop sharing. Perfect. So can you share the presentation, please? Because
yes,
here we cannot see.
You should see it. Right?
Perfect. So 70 minutes, including one question.
Okay.
That's the time for the next 4 speakers. So
okay.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Luca Morganti from the University of Ferrara, and I'm going to tell you about a project of regeneration of industrial architecture that we developed inside the workshop of synthesis, final synthesis of architectural technology project in the University of Ferrara. And I'm going to do that following 5 points. First, very brief of introduction of the context of sustainability and circular economy. Then I'm going to keep going with the industrial archaeology and methodological recovery approach. The XCR case study will be presented, and then the application of the multiphysics simulation model that we have applied on the case study. Then some conclusion. So starting from the context of the presentation, I'm going to be brief because, I mean, this is the last day of the SP, and those are aspects that should be discussed enough. So the impact of the construction sector is huge at the moment, and we have to focus on build less as possible, as good as possible, and following a life cycle thinking approach as much as possible. Now, I'm gonna show you the graphic proposed by Leti. That's the London Energy Transformation Initiative that tries to, it aims to indicate which building interventions are to be favored for the elimination of waste and non-renewable materials from the construction chain. As Huda said, in UK, they are really ambitious as much as necessary targets to respect to 2050, and that's an approach that they graphize to show which actions should be preferred in order to act on the current built environment, like maintain, refurbish, repurpose, in order to have a future built environment designed to avoid waste and outputs in a, as I said, circular economy hierarchy. Now, that's the approach that we wanted to apply. Also, if this graphic has been published just this year on industrial archaeologies that are potential resources thanks to their morphotypological and dimensional characteristics. And after a study phase, they can be readapted for different purposes, even protecting the memory value of the local identity of the places where they are often located. And often, due to the spread of the city, those places are quite next to the central of the city, at least in Italy, is often like that. Now, that's a big frame of the ideal approach that we conceived during the project. And the purpose was to find a way to use industrial archaeology, regenerated, in order to minimize the environmental impact, protect the built heritage, integrate cultural and tourist recovery, and actuate the recovery of related degraded areas, and so on, using the tools of the digital transition, so BIM-based software and a digital twin of the project. But today, I'm gonna focus on the building simulation used to verify the bioclimatic study, the bioclimatic project that we have done during the design. So now I'm going to speak about the Exir case study. That's a former warehouse of chemical fertilizers. SIR is the name of the company that had it during his function, Società Interconsorziale Romagnola, which is the object of the study project presented today. The building is made up of 34 cast in situ reinforced concrete arches, 30 meters in wide and 17 meters in height, arranged for 175 meters in length, so a really huge building. And it was built in 1957 and nowadays is catalogued as paraboloid industrial archaeology. So the objective of this work were different and multiscalar. They have been developed according to the different operational guidelines that characterize the scales addressed. And there are the refurbishment proposal of the entire urban area, as we can see from the axonometric section of the urban area, the repurpose and regeneration plan of the building, and the verification with the software of the expected passive bioclimatic models. And this last part is the most innovative, we can say. Now, that's just to let you know the shape of the building and the type of the intervention. With the function that we put inside the building are representative of the individual and collective cultural development object desired by the local urban plans. We put inside a university space study, a smart working area, and a Fab Lab. Fab Lab, I don't know if it's international as slang, it's just a laboratory where citizens and SME can meet to develop together new kind of ideas and projects. And these ones, or these functions, were mainly placed in the architectural volumes positioned under the extensive roof, the parabolic roof. Now, for the creation of these new environments, has been planned the use of reversible and recyclable technological solution capable of coping with the considerable complexity of the project's environmental system. And that's just a focus on a detail that will be useful during the presentation. Those were the former loading and unloading towers of the warehouse that we proposed to transform into the tower of wind, a wind tower, with a rotatable cap able to follow the wind direction. So now let's speak about the main topic of today, that it's the multi-physics simulation model that we applied on the building. And we started just with a daylight factor simulation, just to verify that the places inside could be comfortable for the function that we want to put inside. And then we go through a multi-physics simulation in order to verify if the natural ventilation of the spaces and the thermal comfort inside the building. Now, that multi-physics simulation has been done following three phases, during phases that has been done at the same time of the design phase. So those analyses has been useful to achieve I hope, a good project. Now, the first phase is a feasibility study that aimed at investigating and verifying what possibilities are offered by the existing form in the climatic condition in which it's found, and for the implementation of passive environmental system. The second one, the numerical study, is meant to measure the higher exchange rate and flow rate for natural ventilation and in the various possible opening assets. And now we can see for every steps how the model has been reduced in complexity, because the complexity of the calculation is being higher and higher. We can see there the meshes of the model, and every angle of the triangles are a dot of calculation. So every time for the machine, we had to simplify the model. And at last, the third phase, the thermodynamic study, had the objective to quantify the thermal condition given by the heat dispersions of the new volumes inside the paraboloid toward the space interposed to the existing. So we're gonna see later what does it mean. Now, that's just some screenshot from the various analyses that we have done. That's from the first phase where we had constant the higher flows inside the building. Its parabolic section doesn't generate over or under pressure areas, and it tends to create a circular flow with horizontal axis inside the construction. As we can see inside the building, the red arrows shows the directions of the wind, so we can see the circularity of the flow. And the former loading towers on the northeast front of the building had been found suitable to be a wind tower. Then, in order to go over with the second part, we had to calculate how much should be the flow rate inside the building. Now, I'm gonna skip fast this part, telling you that we focused on 1.10 0.1, we can say, flow rate for single bay of air exchange as minimum. So in the numerical part, that's just some example. We introduce our intervention inside the building, and we calculate if the rate of the bay, the flow rate in the bay, could be enough. And then the first measurement have shown that the air input in an average wind speed can reach a spike of 150 times greater than the minimum required. Then that in case of total opening of the external casing, starting from this encouraging data, many other were carried out to evaluate which asset could be better in various seasons. Now we also did some simulation to understand if in case of zero wind, the wind chimney could work alone to guarantee the required flow rate ventilation, and the answer was yes. The effectiveness of the wind chimney has been verified. And now we go through the third part of the calculation, the thermodynamic one, in which for the realization, let me say that for the realization of this phase, it was necessary to implement the model of all the information relating to the physical characteristic of its element, like transmittance and reflectance and emissivity of the external surface. And the thermodynamic analysis was calculated with an air exchange rate corresponding to the minimum required by the legislation. And this last simulation showed us that the existence of the double envelope permit, this is the winter case with 5 Celsius degree outside and 21 inside, shows that the dispersions of heat of the internal heat a bit the space in between, with guaranteeing mitigation of the temperature, and so of the loss of heat. Those are the temperature medium inside the in-between space. That's the summer analysis. In conclusion, that's just a late year worked graphic with our project, and returning so to this circular economy hierarchy. It's worth specifying that although the monumental value of the X-sphere and its morphology were a characterizing factor during the study, industrial architecture of smaller dimensions or with different morphologies can also be dedicated to the adoption of passive efficiency strategies. However, these opportunities will be complex to analyze and difficult to read in the absence of an in-depth multi-criteria analysis investigation, without which important potential of exchanging the recovery intervention will be lost. So, thank you for your attention, and that's it. That's our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca. There is one space for one question. There is space. I don't know if you have some question. Also from the audience in remote. No? Okay. So thank you so much, Luca.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We can move to the next presentation from Tracy. So if you can share the screen, we can see if everything will work.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Clearly. Thanks very much indeed. Well, this is rather a different presentation, so I think this has been an interesting session with lots of different things coming from different perspectives. Today, I want to talk about a project that's actually very close to my heart. It's called What's in a Meter? And rather optimistically, I said I was going to talk about articulating a sustainable future for India's energy system and the role of smart meters. This is the sustainable element is rather optimistic. This work is from a project that's funded by the British Academy. And we have some wonderful partners at the Centre for Urban Science and Engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, in Mumbai, obviously now. And it also includes both myself, Professor Tracy Crosby, I'm a Professor of Sustainability in the Built Environment, and Dana Abhiganam's been doing a lot of the research on this. She's actually with you personally. And it not only includes people from the school which we're in, which is the School of Social Science, Humanities and Law at Teesside University, but also a lot of our colleagues from the School of Computing, Engineering and Digital Technology. So it's a truly interdisciplinary project. So what are we doing? We are investigating how the access to key essential energy and water services are being reconfigured within metering technologies currently planned for and implemented in the rapidly growing cities in the global south. And just to give you an idea of the scale of the problem, here is a photograph of Mumbai, which I think brings the key problems here really into focus. We are using Greater Mumbai in India as a case study. The goal is to inform the implementation and use of energy and water metering in ways that encourage social inclusion, environmentally sensitive consumption patterns, and reduces health inequalities. So why meters, you might ask? Well, if you think about it for a moment, the metering of consumption is essential to the efficient operation and planning of electricity and water networks. And it's often really lacking or in really not fit for purpose in many of the cities in the global south. This has led national and international agencies and governments to encourage the introduction of smarter, more comprehensive metering in the water and electricity sectors right across the global south. Energy and water meters, if we stop to think about it for one moment, they're gateway technologies. They control our access to energy and water. And if you think about it, they're currently being used to re-engineer the provision of electricity and water, particularly in the global south. And I'll come back to this point, but the choices of meters are not merely technical ones. So why meters in India? Well, the UN Sustainable Development Goal 3, good health and well-being, cannot be met in India or the rest of the global south without universal access to electricity and water. Without improved metering, universal access to energy and water cannot be achieved. And this is essential to the Sustainable Development Goal 3. The question is, and these are some of the questions we're trying to answer, what are the impacts of new forms of water and electricity metering on the efficient use of limited resources, on formal and informal access to electricity and water, and on inequalities in the health and well-being of the population in general, and those living in poverty in particular? In India, new forms of electricity and water metering are currently being planned and rolled out, and they offer a radically new potential for controlling and reshaping the vast water and electricity infrastructures in India's rapidly expanding cities. So I'll not go into, they have a smart metering program which aims to replace, if you think about it, 250 million conventional meters with smart meters. In parts of India, there is literally no metering for water. So we need to think about it. Engineering here needs to be informed by social science. If we think about it, organisational, political and cultural factors influence the selection of different technical choices. So, for instance, the movement away from gas heating in the UK is proving really difficult. This is because our infrastructures are prevailing organisational, political and cultural factors made concrete, and therefore they are very, very difficult to change. So historically in the UK, we heated our homes by gas. That's because we lit our homes by gas and the infrastructures were already there. And now we're finding it really difficult to move from that. And it's being done in a piecemeal way. And in India, the changes that they're trying to introduce are constrained by the lack of metering and their current infrastructures. So the approach we're taking is from science and technology studies. This focuses on how organisational, political and cultural factors influence the process of technological innovation and development. And in this case, we're specifically concerned with how organisational, political and cultural factors are influencing the implementation of energy and water metering in the Global South, and how the ways in which new forms of energy and water metering are being implemented in the Global South impact on people's access to essential services. And again, here I want us to think about it. Meters are not merely measuring devices. There are multiple opportunities for the development of environmental and social applications within different metering systems, including improving the efficiency of energy and water networks, providing customers with cost and environmental messages through users' displays, and providing more equitable access to scarce resources by telescopic tariffs. These are tariffs where you have a low tariff at the beginning for essential energy and water access for those essential things, and then more luxury consumption can be more expensive. However, the take-up of these potentials is strongly framed by competing economic, political and social priorities. And in particular, telescopic tariffs in India are proving problematic because lots of houses and lots of dwellings in India don't have their own meter when they're rented. The owner has the meter who lives in a property nearby, and they get the low tariff, and then they charge the other people in their properties the higher tariff because their rental properties don't have a separate meter. So the thing is here, the approach we're taking enables an interdisciplinary approach. So metering options are not viewed purely as technical choices, and we don't overlook the impacts they may have on access to water and electricity provision. Our project draws on sociology, electrical engineering and public health. We focus very much on the co-creation and co-production approach. And to support this approach, we have developed a research training programme, which I'll point to at the end of this presentation. So our project has 3 integrated work packages. The first one focuses on the investigation of the technical infrastructure of electricity and water metering in the Global South. The second is a critical assessment of electricity and water metering infrastructures. Here we've conducted interviews with industry and policy stakeholders to explore how different socio-political affiliations impact on decision-making and technical choices in relation to metering infrastructure in India, with a focus on Greater Mumbai. Our third work package involves understanding the impacts of the water and electricity metering infrastructure on communities. Here we conducted interviews with householders to explore how deprivation and uneven access to energy and water impacts on different socioeconomic groups, again with a focus on Greater Mumbai. And today I'm going to quickly tell you about some of the things we found in work packages 1 and 2. So in our interviews with industry stakeholders, we found that meters were seen very much as a technological fix. It's perceived as a solution to a host of managerial issues, including improving bill connection, separating the non-payment and disconnection of customers. Now, this is a really interesting one, because you can see here that if you have a prepayment meter installed, then if they don't put money on that meter, then they've seen to self-disconnect. This is how it works in the UK. However, they probably haven't put money on the meter just because they can't afford it. They're also seen as, by industry, as facilitating smarter and fairer payment structures. So telescopic tariffs are seen as possible, but not the main focus. And they're also keenly seen as providing the ability to reduce losses on the distribution network for water and electricity. So in our interviews with industry, it was seen that this metering would establish a formality. Installing meters and smart meters for electricity formalises connections to services. It puts in place payment tariffs that could mean lower bills for electricity and reduces inequitable metering practices by avoiding electricity submetering in informal settlements. This is what I was mentioning earlier on when we were talking about the way that current telescopic tariffs, when you have informal submetering in informal settlements, is unfair, because this means that the poorest people are paying the most for their energy. So metering was seen as a technology that can herald cultural change, believe it or not, at the organisational level of distribution companies and water authorities. It was seen that with smarter meters, the way things are done in water and electricity will be improved. And it was seen as that smarter meters would have the ability to help companies rid themselves of organisational practices that have become normalised. It's almost as if they're seen as some kind of magical fix to all of the current problems within companies about negligent practices. And importantly, this is a key one, metering was seen as shifting responsibility from state government for services to the users. So instead of the state being responsible for ensuring that people had access to energy and water within rapidly growing cities like Mumbai, it was seen as having the ability to shift the responsibility to the individual. They are responsible to pay for and provide services for their families or households. Yeah. And this is a really important shift in the way that people within the industry are thinking about their role. Their role is no longer in their minds to drive forward access for everybody. That's not their role anymore. If people don't have access, it's their own fault for not paying for the energy and water, even though there are many people in poverty that can't pay for energy and water. When we talked to householders, trust was at the heart of the successful functioning of metering and billing practices, particularly among lower socioeconomic groups, where shared meters and billing were more common. Difficult factors involved not being able to check meter readings and mistrust of leaders, but also of trusting those with whom bills and meters were shared to use utilities responsibly, because they felt They shared the bill, but some people were using a lot more than other people. And expectedly rather than unexpectedly, unequal access to utilities largely reflected wider social inequalities. These inequalities included difficulties in challenging or questioning bills for individuals by those who are not confident in their levels of literacy and numeracy, issues surrounding gender, and others who felt that utilities were part of a wider drive to displace marginalised communities. Here we have some quotes from interviewees. I can no longer read and understand an electricity bill. There are so many charges for various reasons, and it all comes to a really huge amount. And another one, honestly, I don't have enough time to spend on it. If I have to spend a day on it, the money that I lose when I take leave from work will be more. So if we turn back now to...
Sorry, Tracy, we are running out of time. If you can...
Okay, 2 minutes, okay? So if we turn metering in India, the barriers are political meddling, especially in informal neighbourhoods. Resources are needed to tackle theft on the system beyond a techno fix. Lack of joined up plans for poverty reduction that would reduce non-payment, informality and lack of access. And the opportunities, there's opportunities to increase renewable energy technology penetration and to drive towards the smarter grids, and also to facilitate self-generation of electricity and ecological water management. Okay, finally, future visions of energy metering and service provision. New meters, unfortunately, are largely perceived to be a technical fix. Ecological and environmental solutions are largely sidelined. Providing more equitable access to scarce resources is also sidelined because there is not a drive to implement them in the informal settlements where the people in real poverty live. And also there is a shift of responsibility from the state for services to users as customers. And this is largely embedding the wider social inequalities in the new metering systems being designed and implemented in India. So I suppose at the end of this presentation, I am saying that a more sustainable system and a fairer system is not being articulated by industry and by the socio-political context in India with regards to the rollout of smart metering. If you've been really interested by what we've had to say, we're conducting a transdisciplinary workshop, and please contact us if you would like to attend, where you'll be able to find out a lot more about our project. And finally, we do have an online research training program on YouTube. You can search for it, Teesside University, and there you can find out everything about how we conducted our research. And thank you. I tried to go quickly.
Thank you, Trey. We have time for one question. Any questions so far from our remote speakers, participants?
May I ask a question,
Yes.
Andre here?
Yes, of course.
Tracy, thank you so much for this really good presentation on the Indian context, smart metering rollout and infrastructure development. So I once had a very small study on prepaid metering rollout in Kenya, Nairobi there. So is there some comparison among different cities and regions of the global south that you conducted, or is it really the focus on India, or are you looking to the rest of the global south to implement learnings from them?
Okay, it will be very interesting to look at that. Our work is a focus case study research on Greater Mumbai, but we're looking for funding to take it further. and do a comparison right across India, Pakistan, and the whole of the global south, depending on budget. I agree with you. The implementation of smart metering is of a prepayment metering is really strange, because the way it can be implemented can actually mean that the poorest people in our society end up paying the most for their energy. So one of the key things that upset me quite deeply is the way that it's being considered in India is to copy the English example, the British example. And what we've done in the UK is we've forced people who have problems with paying their bills to have a prepayment meter, and we charge them more per unit of energy for their electricity and gas. So because they say, oh, it's more expensive to service them and they're not such valuable customers. So how it works out is in the UK, and this has been transferred to India, is that the poorest people in our society pay the most per unit for their energy. And I find that immoral. And I would like to do, I would love to have a talk with you, Andre, to find out how prepayment metering was implemented in Kenya. So do email me. You can find me. I'm everywhere. I'm on, you can chat with me here, or you can find me on Teesside University's website. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Orchid. And I'd be really interested in taking this idea further of doing a comparison across the whole of the global south. And thanks for the question.
Okay, thank you. So we can move to the next speaker, which is. Oh, I don't think so, but we are recording the session, so I don't think. Yes, after we share it, we take a few weeks, and after all the session should be shared. Okay. Do you have the open? So that you have your account, you can look for that. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much. Yes, I think that should be here. So this one. Oh, I need my pointer as well. Okay.
It's that one. This one. Yeah, it's in downloads.
Okay.
Okay.
No,
it's there. It's that one. Yeah.
The PowerPoint here.
No.
So close.
We got it?
Yeah.
All right.
So
technology is amazing. It really helps us in our everyday lives, but sometimes it doesn't quite go according to plan.
So it's distributed sensor.
Yeah, that's it. It's on the screen.
Okay, maybe
we just need to make it.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you see?
No, one second.
Just 1 second. Can you see the screen in remote?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Amazing. So it's so good to see you all, and it's brilliant to see so many bright faces in this room ready to listen. So let's take a look and see a little bit closer about what I'm here to present to you. My job at NAQCS over at the University of Lancaster is all to do with understanding sensors and indoor air quality. Specifically, this PowerPoint is about distributed sensors and indoor air quality, a trilemma that's affecting UK classrooms. Alongside my work, I work with Adrian Friday and Douglas Booker. They're not here today, but if you've got any questions, you can direct them to me or you can email them. Continuing on, so when we talk about air quality, a lot of our focus is on air quality outdoors. We think about pollution and we think about, grey clouds, dust, cars, things that come out of there. But in reality, we spend 90% of our time indoors. So why would we focus just on outdoor air pollution when everything that we do, or most of what we do, happens indoors? Now, there are a lot of studies already that highlight the risks and the links between air pollution and poor academic achievements. And we already know how bad poor air pollution or poor air quality can be to our own health and well-being. You might be aware of it firsthand if you notice yourself nodding off in lessons at school, or if you find things a little bit harder to concentrate or understand when things get a bit stuffy. In the UK, around 30,000 deaths per year are attributed to air pollution, and it's considered the greatest environmental threat to public health. And children are in particular more vulnerable to respiratory complications just due to the fact that they have narrower airways, smaller lungs, higher breathing rates, and of course they're a little bit shorter, which means they're closer to dust particles on the ground. Now we ask and we pose the question, what is the air quality like in a classroom, and how can this be constructed, explained, and understood? Now, when thinking of a classroom, we started to come together with this idea of a trilemma, 3 different challenges that act and interact with each other. This includes things like stakeholder requirements. That's all to do with what people want from the room, what occupants want, what the teachers, the students, what the building management staff want, maybe even the legislation that the government puts out. We then have air quality, of course. I'm biased, I think that's the most important, but different people will place different importance on different areas. And then we have, of course, energy usage, which is quite closely linked to stakeholder requirements and air quality, because good air quality is usually consisted of better ventilation. But of course, when you open the windows and you increase the ventilation, you need to heat the place up more, because otherwise it's going to get too cold. And when you do that, suddenly you've got a conflict there with energy. It's very similar when we think about energy and stakeholder requirements, because the people who own those buildings, the people who pay for them, they might not be able to pay for the rising cost of energy. So there's another conflict there, especially when it comes to taking into account the CO2 footprint of buildings. From our research, we found that the 3rd greatest cost to schools in the UK is actually energy costs. And then, of course, stakeholder requirements and air quality. Like I said, schools need to be really, really interested in the health and well-being of their staff and of their pupils. Before we go into our investigation, let's take a step back and think about who we are. So my PhD is funded by the EU, by the UK Research and Innovation Council. But I work with that company there, the Centre for Global Eco-Innovation. They've placed me with NAQTS, or National Air Quality Testing Services, who've got over 30 years of experience in air quality. And I work with them to collect some of the results that I'm going to be presenting today. So let's jump into things. The exact questions that we set out to answer with my PhD and with our research is, how does air quality vary across the classroom and what factors can affect it? As you may imagine, classrooms are lots of different shapes, lots of different sizes, and there are lots of factors in place. The air quality over there, all the way in the back by the door, will be completely different to the air quality that I'm in. Likewise, the windows will have a different level of air quality just to direct connection with the sun and also fresh air. So it's really important that we understand what affects the air quality. Of course, when working in a school, you need to understand the potential challenges of collecting that data. What if a kid knocks it over? What if someone throws it? What if someone lights a fire next to it? We need to understand what's going on and how we can make sure our data that's being collected isn't just accurate, but also verifiable and valuable. And of course, finally, how best can we provide unobtrusive and actionable air quality data? Anyone can collect air quality data. You can just write down that the air is good or bad. But how can we take that data and how can we make sure that it helps people to understand the environment and make better choices? I think we're making a choice right now, aren't we, with opening the window? Of course, it's also got to be unobtrusive. Being in a classroom, our sensors need to be small. You might notice that I've been waving around this sensor. This is not the sensor that we use. Ours are much better than this. But this is small and it's very useful for understanding what the air's like where you are. You can just whip it out and see. Right now, in fact, we have 629 particles per million of CO2. That's an important number. Keep it in your head. We're going to look more at that later on. Now, our methods when coming towards our presentation or our data collection was split into 2 halves. First of all, we thought about our interviews and our presentation when we talk to the students and the teachers and we understand what they feel before we go to our sensors. Our second half was a deployment, but all to do with the indoor air quality in their classrooms, how they felt about it, any sort of themes or understandings we could identify. We then went through a thematic analysis where we put down our key points and any recurring motives. After the deployment, once we got the data, we then went back to them and we asked them a little bit more about what's going on to see if they could explain what was happening. Of course, raw numbers doesn't show you the entire story, so that was really valuable. Now here's the fun stuff, the deployment itself. Now this may look complicated, but it's quite easy. So you can see those black boxes, they're about the size of a shoebox or a small backpack. They are our V2000 indoor air quality sensors. They were developed by NAQTS. And if this is like one of those little scooters you see zipping around the city, that would be a private jet or a Rolls Royce. It is incredible. But yeah, they monitor things like CO2, PM2.5, so small little particles such as the airborne droplets from our spit or our sneezes, and PM10, bigger particles like dust and smaller than hair, as well as temperature and humidity. If you'd like to know more about the sensors themselves, there's a QR code just there, and we have a fantastic write-up and a spec sheet all about them. But on the topic of the deployment, remember, our question is about how the air quality varies across a room. So we took 3 sensors and we placed them in different parts of a laboratory. Let's see if the laser works. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So this sensor here, the green sensor by the window, that was of course by the window next to fresh air, but also next to a fan. It was at the back of the classroom though, but it's near the desk where the students sit. This sensor just here, the orange sensor or the red sensor, is on the desk, and that's representing what the teacher would feel. It's closest to them because of course teachers are older, they might have different feelings in regards to the air quality, they might have different tastes. And we thought that was really important. And then we highlighted this blue sensor over here. You might notice it's next to some fumigation chambers. That's because this isn't just any classroom, this is a laboratory, a lab, a science lab, which means some of our data was really, really interesting. So as you can see, 3 different sensors in 3 different places to help us understand the spatial awareness of these sensors. Okay, we left them there over a 3-week period to collect some results, and we do have some results to share. Now, we're one of the only companies who works with schools in the UK, specifically for indoor air quality, and we're really privileged to be able to share this with you. So let's take a look. The way I'm going to be presenting these is a little bit interesting. We're going to start off with a quote, which is from the pre-interview. We're then going to show you a data set that kind of expands on the quote or explains how they feel or perhaps why. And then we'll finish off with a quote from after they've had a chance to see the data, and so they can tell us what they think. So let's take a look. Our first result is talking a little bit about spatial variation. This is a direct quote from the teacher's interview. I tend to place the fans away from my desk so that it's impacting on the majority of the classroom. How very kind of them. This is the data that we saw. So if you take a look at these if you take a look at these graphs, you can see we have temperature on the left-hand side there. On the bottom, we have the date, and on the top, we have the times, which correspond with the times of the day, with the lesson starting at 9, finishing off at 4. Now, as you can see, there is a massive trend here. The temperature is within 2 or 3 degrees of each other. But when we consider that some people are going to be in the sunlight, and they're going to be hit with that light for the entire day, whereas others are going to be in the corner where the air is more stagnant, we start to understand why the complaints and the understanding of the air quality in the room might be so different. Different students are going to have completely different ideas because none of them are experiencing the exact same temperature. Okay? And showing this to the teacher, we start to think about how the fans weren't actually doing their job. We can see here with the green, the orange, and the blue sensors, which connotate the corner, the desk, and the window, that the fans aren't actually doing a good job. There's no actual there's ventilation going on, but it's just blowing around that hot air. And then we start to think about the bottom quote. The windows are open and the fans are on, but is that actually making the room cooler? Because the windows don't open the whole way. And the fresh air might not be so fresh, especially considering the school could be close to an industrial area, and the outside temperature might be hotter anyway. Okay? Continuing on, now we're going to be talking a little bit about building limitations. Now, this is different depending on where you are in the world, but in the UK, there are certain legislations based on things like windows. For safety reasons, windows can't open the entire way, especially in a school, because you can imagine how wrong that could get. So the windows are bolted in place, and there's perspex, like a plastic film that goes over them, meaning they only open a crack. So what do we think would happen here? The data that I'm going to show you is interesting. This is the levels of CO2 in that room. And this is the really fun stuff, or the not so fun stuff, depending on how you're thinking about it. So CO2 is a measurement of all the gas that's coming out of your mouth. Of course, when you've got 30 children in a room, that's 31 mouths, 30 children and a teacher. Now we can see here that depending on the time of day, the CO2 level goes up and it goes down, corresponding with the lessons and the occupancy. What I really want to draw your attention to, though, is the numbers themselves. We can see at the purple line, it goes over 1,000, and at the orange line, it goes over 1,500. Outside, the usual level of CO2 is around 450 ppm. Over 1,000, you may notice things like headaches, nausea, you might find it difficult to concentrate, you might be yawning, and you're going to find it really hard to work at your best. Over 1,500, well, that's really bad, because when you're there for a long period of time, that's when you start to get lung problems. You might develop asthma, you're going to be coughing, you're going to be sneezing, you might pass out. It's really quite horrible. And as we can see here, it crosses that threshold 3 times in that day. Now, you'll also notice that we have a long decay curve here. That's because everyone's left and the CO2 starts to leave the room. And using that, we can calculate something called a Wells-Rayleigh-based air change rate equation. So for every hour, 35% of the air is replaced in that room. Okay? So if only 35% of the air is fresh, then the teacher is breathing in the same air. Think of the germs and the dust. And for members of staff that have been there every day, the long-term impact, well, what's it going to be like? It's going to be quite worrying, right? Especially if the teacher is there the entire day and they see those 3 episodes of extreme CO2 levels. Continuing on. So one last one before we move on, the niche event. So the teacher mentions that a lot of the other classrooms have air conditioning, including the ICT rooms, but her classroom doesn't. And that's interesting because her classroom, of course, is a laboratory. So imagine the experiments that happen in there, and then imagine the kind of results we're going to see. This graph here is of PM 2.5. That's particulate matter of 2.5 micrograms. And we can see here that it spikes all the way up to 100 when they're going through an experiment period. Now, to give you an example, right now, the PM 2.5 in this room is 0.6. And over there, it's 100 or over 100. That is incredibly unhealthy. But it happens anyway, because what's the alternative? They need to do these experiments. They can't risk not teaching the children. They've just got to grit and bear it. And taking these results back to the teacher, she mentions that she could see and identify that that was a day where they did an experiment, just because the peak was so high. It actually helped her remember what she was doing. And of course, in this case in particular, the big thing is that if they're not using those fumigation cupboards because they're not told to, and those windows are bolted shut with perspex and are covered, then the ventilation is really, really bad, and it's only just going to negatively affect everyone's health. One thing in particular to note here is that one of the sensors was lagging behind the others in terms of how quickly it reduced back down to normal. And of course, that's something that we can highlight as an area of really stagnant air. So that's one to really look out for. Now, if you remember earlier, I did ask you guys to remember a number. Who remembered the number? 677 ppm. So that's actually quite healthy in this room, but I suppose we're quite lucky because there isn't that many of us and we've got quite good ventilation. Let's continue then. So to bring us back to a concluding, I know, it's fine. So the data shows that the air quality can vary by a large margin across a classroom. There's an obvious conflict in stakeholder needs, which then leads to these inefficiencies. This could be solved using our sensors to help coordinate things like HVAC, or to let people know if it's a case where they need to open a window, maybe they need to leave a classroom and come back, or maybe they need to just, increase the ventilation if they do have air conditioning. The sensors that we use must be small, affordable, and simple, so anyone can use them, and there's a wide range of accessibility to them. And of course, the data collected needs to be readable and actionable by all stakeholders. It's not something that just one teacher can do. It's not something that specialist staff need to be able to do. It's something that everyone can take ownership with and work with. Of course, there we have our magical triangle, stakeholder requirements versus air quality and energy. And just to finish off, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them now. That goes for you guys at home too. That's me there. That's my professor, Adrian Friday, who I work with. And that's Douglas Booker, the CEO of the company that I'm placed with, NAQTS. That there, the cat, is our hard-working lead hardware engineer. He's amazing. And that is a QR code that just takes you to a project overview of what we're trying to achieve in my PhD and at NAQTS and at CGE. It's been an absolute pleasure. Any questions? Ooh, brilliant. Of course, of course.
So I found the talk very interesting.
Thank you.
Obviously, you've taken into account the number of occupancy because different classes, different level.
Definitely.
Would be nice to see a graph showing the difference.
Fantastic.
And the other thing is, did you take into account whether how many doors in the room, how many, you know, which one was open, which one closed, seasonality, things like that? Does it make a difference?
So the way we collect our data, we do 2 periods of data collection. We usually go in the autumn and then in the spring, or we will do winter and summer. In this case, on the question of doors and windows, in this classroom, we verified before we went in that all the doors are automatically closing for safety and security purposes. The windows, of course, we already know, but they're highlighted there in the blue lines. I know it's a little bit tricky to see, but yeah, those are the windows. Were there any other questions? Yeah, so as I said, we collect data 2 times per year. We can obviously do it a lot more, and we can do it constantly if needed. But realistically, when we work with our schools, we do a summer and a winter, or we do an autumn and a spring. In terms of seasonality, there are lots of interesting changes we notice. Of course, when it rains, the level of particles counted might be a little bit higher. In the winter, because people are colder, they're more likely to travel by car, and because of that, the external pollution is higher, and that can affect it. Of course, in the summer, the heat rises, and that's going to be affecting things like their thermal comfort, but also the amount of energy expended to keep a room in a good Goldilocks zone. So there's lots going on there, but I really appreciate that question, Huda. Thank you. Dana?
Is there time for one more? It's just one more.
Thank you, Iman, for a great presentation. I wonder, because the elephant in the room here is obviously COVID-19.
Yep.
Some of your respondents mentioned the things breathing in. Has that come up in your interviews with the stakeholders?
Well, thank you for asking that, because that's a really important question. We don't want our focus to be buried away when people start to forget about COVID, if they could. So that's why we focus a lot on the future, which is why we talk about air pollution. When COVID happened, of course, there was a massive switch. I mentioned it earlier, but we went from making spaces that are insulated to forcing them to ventilate, which then leads to that inefficiencies. And there was a massive push to understand the air around us. Now, our sensors, they don't detect COVID exactly, but by understanding things like ventilation rates and the number of particles in the air, we can start to ascertain whether a space is safe or not. But the COVID period was really interesting because it was a massive push forward of indoor air quality, and the spotlight was placed on how clean and how safe are our indoor environments. It definitely rested over the heads of a lot of the educators in the UK that we've worked with. The first thing they would always say is, okay, during COVID, we did this differently. Do we still do it now? Should we still do it now? Is the air quality better just because there isn't COVID, or are there other things that are wrong? There are an awful lot of questions that they ask, but it was amazing just getting that hands-on contact time with them. And I think that's one of the things that sets us apart, the fact that we go in there and we ask them what they think, because that's often ignored a lot when you do research. But yeah, thank you for that question, and I hope I answered it.
It's interesting, the temporariness of these things, like we spoke about this morning, you know, in the context of COVID, things that we put in place and then we forgot about them.
Exactly. So it's like we learn so much.
That's quite interesting for me as a scientist.
Yeah, it's almost like we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but slow changes, little changes can lead to big things, right?
Thank you so much. Huh? Really nice. So I remember when I was at school, we were in a smaller room like that, 25 students. Yeah. So that's a lot of years ago. Exactly. I'm still young, but but you know, it was that's at the time. Oh, we're 25 in a smaller room. Okay, so we'll move to the last presentation. Okay, so. It's Andrea. You are mute, Andrea.
Yeah, I'm here, but unfortunately I not have any chance to. Okay, 1 second. I was in the full screen mode, and in full screen I cannot share my desktop.
Yes.
I will do now. Okay, give me 1 second, please. You should be able to see my screen now.
Perfect. We'll try to 1 second to make it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So welcome everybody. Those online I've already seen, and those in the classroom, in the presentation room, hello as well. My name is André Müller. I'm from the Institute for Housing and Environment in Darmstadt. and also from the Institute of Concrete and Masonry Structures at the Technical University of Darmstadt, and both in Germany. I will have a talk on the early stage optimization for urban district renovation in Germany, which is part or result of our E4Q project, which I will introduce in brief during the next slides. So have a short look on the agenda for this talk. First, I will give you a very brief introduction on the background of our research and on the research project with the aims and the scopes of the project. Then we come to the methodology, and I will show you the E4Q early stage evaluation tool, which we developed based on the methodology defined. And in the end, I will give you a short overview on urban district analysis, which is possible with this tool, and which conclusions we could derive from our research in this project. So we've heard a lot of that. Climate crisis hits societies in Europe and globally. We've seen this summer with the dry weeks and less rain than in the past. So this is a big challenge for the future. And to stick to the Paris Agreement goals, we really have to cut the carbon emissions massively during the next decade, during the next few years. If we have a look to the German building sector, we see that the households with their energy consumption for heating, for domestic hot water, for example, and other uses, they account for roughly 30% of the total final energy consumption. And what is worse is that the share of renewable energies in this energy consumption is very, very low, since the mainly installed heating generation technologies are boilers, and boilers based on fossils, so on oil and coal and gas. So that means that they really have a high global warming potential or high CO2 emissions. So for that reason, German legislation is aiming on a climate neutral building stock until 2045, aiming on efficiency increases and decarbonization by introduction of renewable energies into the heating and other household uses. But what we see, what we also see, is that the district level has certain potentials to increase the efficiency of the heating systems of the buildings themselves, and also to achieve some lowering of the cost of renovation of building refurbishment and installation of renewable energy systems. So let's come to the project. In the English title is Integration of Renewable Energies into the Energy Supply for Interconnected Districts. The German abbreviation is E4Q, which I will use here since it's much more easy for me to say it that way. So it's the Institute for Housing and Environment and the Institute of Concrete and Masonry Structures, with some other partners from academia, from the housing companies here in Darmstadt, some energy utilities, and also some stakeholders from the public administrations in Darmstadt and other towns here in Germany. The aims and the scope, let's see, the aims were to identify renovation concepts for districts which contribute to achieving the climate mitigation targets, but also preserving certain economic feasibility. So it is always the discussion in public is always, can we afford to do these renovations we really need to achieve our climate goals? And the second is to deliver something that is supporting the stakeholders in district renovation planning during very early project phases, since mostly the stakeholders, they have the feeling that the risk of economic cost increases is very high, and that the potentials are not really clear. So we really wanted to support them to make decisions for climate neutrality relevant or good examples, concepts at a very early point in time during their concept and projects. So the scope is on the urban settings. So since there are lots of technologies which really function in the urban context. So we are focusing on urban districts. We also focusing on market available technology. So we do not want to have some analysis on technologies which have a very low TRL, so technology readiness level, which may be not feasible to really go into the market and help stakeholders which are practically planning and building or renovating districts. So focus on available technologies. And in the end, we really want to evaluate the production and the demand for energy locally, with a focus on the local renewable energy sources for heat and power. So this is a link to the methodology we used. Let's come to the methodology. So first we defined a set of evaluation indicators. So what is most common in the building sector with regards to energy performance evaluation of buildings and districts are these energy-related evaluation indicators. So the final energy demand, the self-sufficiency from local renewable energies, or the self-consumption of electricity locally produced by either renewable energies or from other sources. So we broadened that set of indicators to ecological indicators, which means we introduced another concept where we introduced a life cycle assessment, showing the global warming potential as one lead indicator for our analyses and evaluations. Furthermore, the non-renewable primary energy demand, which is needed to not only establish these district renovation concepts, but also to use the buildings over the lifetime. And finally, the third pillar of our evaluation indicators are the economic viability indicators. So it's the present value of a life cycle costing analysis, and it's all clearly the investment cost for these district concepts. So the balancing boundaries, I already said it briefly. They are much wider than they are for a standard energy evaluation, energy performance evaluation. So usually we have the domestic hot water, the heating, ventilation, and cooling energy needs in a house or in a district. We also include electricity production from local renewable energies, and that's the border of our balancing scheme usually. Here in our E4Q project, we broadened that. So first we have not only the usage, we have the construction, the usage, and the demolition phases. So that's a life cycle thinking we implemented here. And on the other hand, we also apply with regards to the usage, the household appliances. So within a district, it's not only the energy need for heating, cooling, on domestic hot water, but it's also the people living there, having their daily life and needing energy for televisions, for whatever, the laundry or whatever they are doing. So we take this into account and really want to have a complete balance of energies or energy in this districts. If we go on with the methodology, what we defined based on studies from other researchers in Germany, we defined archetype districts. So we defined 9 archetype districts to be able to cover most situations and structures of city structures in German urban contexts and cities in Germany. So it is from the detached single-family houses to some apartment buildings, either in detached or linear configuration, to apartment blocks and some linear apartment buildings with a higher amount of levels, so which is not a high-rise, but or small high-rise buildings, let's say that. We varied not only, so we have these 9 archetype districts, but we varied their sizes also, and we varied some more impacting parameter with regards to the energy balance, so the roof types also. And in total, we have 23 variations of these archetype districts for our project and for the analysis of districts, of urban concepts. The input parameters are wide, so we have the building models which reflecting the type buildings in these archetype districts. We have different insulation levels from non-refurbished as-built building stock buildings to high ambitious renovation levels, which reflect more or less net zero or net energy buildings. We have user behavior, weather data as input parameters. We have different supply infrastructures, which mean decentrally, each building heated and by its own heating generation, but we also have local grids in the district itself, and we have some district heating grid, which is not only for this one particular district we are evaluating, but which is for a number of districts in the community, in the city. And finally, we have several building technologies, as already said, which are market available and which we use for evaluation of concept. So we feed this into building simulations, one for the building itself, on the other hand, for simulation of district grids, local district grids, and we use IDA-ICE, which is a building simulation tool where you can really do analysis with a high temporal resolution, which means you really can reflect the demand and the power generation from renewable energies in a very short time frame, and have good and robust estimations of the self-consumptions and similar energy relevant figures. All that is fed into a heat and power balance and leads to an energy balance database, which we then use as a basis for our early stage evaluation tool. The energy balances, the life cycle costing, and the life cycle assessment processes and calculations, they are part of this tool. And finally, a short presentation of the analysis results, of the evaluation results, is also part of the early stage evaluation tool. Let's have a look. So this is unfortunately in German language only at the moment. The Excel tool, it's pretty easy, compact, not all too much not too difficult to input the data there. So we have some forms, some user forms where you can choose your archetype district for your district itself, and where you can choose how many and which variants energy refurbishment renovation concepts you want to see. And then finally, this is the results, where you have a very condensed expression of the indicators of the E4Q project, and can evaluate for which indicator the concepts are better or not better. And better is unfortunately not one better fits all, but which is depending on the individual stakeholders' set of preferences. So let's come to a short demonstration, or to a demonstration district.
Sorry to interrupt you. If you can speed up, because
okay, I will do so. Thank you.
Almost, yes,
so this demonstration district is from the 1950s, and it had a small refurbishment in the 80s, and this, heating supplies by a local heating district grid. So we designed 3 variants for that, just a very small change from gas boilers to combined heating and power, and an adding of stories on that, and then refurbishment of the building stock available, the combined heating and power, and some photovoltaics. And finally, a really ambitious level of refurbishment, and a large heat pump combined with the PV. And we see that each and every variant is good with regards to the life cycle costing and with regards to the primary energy on global warming potential. So it's better to do refurbishment, renovation concepts than to not do. That's the one point. But we see also that if we have a look at the C0, this is the life cycle costing in the very middle. So we see that the green variant, the refurbishment, the very ambitious refurbishment is also better than the status quo, so doing nothing. So which means if we have this holistic view, as a broadened balancing scheme, we see that economic viability is given for also ambitious refurbishment concepts. So what we did as well as a scenario analysis, I will skip that, just give you one single sentence on that. We did a parametric study. We analyzed more than 1 million concepts for 26 status quo variants for these 23 architect districts. So there's a lot of data we analyzed, and we derived some more or less generic recommendations for the users. And that's where I want to go now, the conclusions. So first, on the tool side, we developed this early stage evaluation tool. It allows the assessment of district renovation concepts without demanding high efforts for data acquisition. So we can use this archetype processes to really save time and effort for data acquisition in the early stages of district concepts. We can derive some generic recommendations on promising concepts with regards to cost, with regards to ecology, with regards to energy. And we can identify optimized renovation concepts based on this holistic set of indicators. Furthermore, the scenario analysis showed that also highly ambitious concepts are first technical possible, and on the other side, economical viable. But the district renovation concepts, so these integrated and ambitious concepts, need new forms of stakeholder cooperation. We see this new balancing boundaries is just working if we have new forms of cooperation among stakeholders. So it's not only the housing company and the utility, so we have to bring them together and do some kind of burden and profit sharing among those stakeholders to get an optimal energy concept or renovation concept for urban districts. And furthermore, and last, there are additional constraints we have to consider if we not only have a look at one single district, but if we want to use that as a kind of blueprint for urban districts in Germany and maybe Europe. So we have to have in mind other constraints. For example, we need a fossil phase out to really reduce our CO2 emissions globally. And we have some certain biomass potentials. That means we cannot use wood, for example, to heat all the buildings and say, okay, that's a solution to fit all. So that's some constraints we see, and we want to do detailed analysis in the future as well. So that's my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and if you have questions, let me know, please.
Just a simple question. Very interesting. Very interesting. My question is your tool? I'm interested in your tool. Is your tool available now, or if it's not, when will it be available?
So we will make it available within the next month. It is not available publicly yet, and so it is in German at the moment only, since it was a project funded in Germany. But if you are interested, just write me an email. I can send you an upfront version of the tool, which is fully capable for use. But at the moment, it's not published yet. But until December, I think we will make it publicly.
Thank you very much. That's exactly what I need. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any questions from the audience? No? Okay, so we can close the session. Thank you for your attendance. And also for all the speakers. Thank you, Tracy, Philippe, Andrea, and Laure.
Thank you. Have a good time.
Enjoy your lunch.